My name is Rosie Kerr. I'm one of the researchers in the Future Harvest Partnership, and I'm really happy to be collaborating with both Janet Dean at the TAA and Sarah at Ecological Farms Association of Ontario. So we have three wonderful speakers with us today, and the purpose of this series of webinars. So we had one last week and we have one next week. So hopefully you'll join that as well. Is to kind of talk about what is farmer-led research, why do farmers do it, and kind of have some farmers talk and tell their stories about their experiences. So last week we had Ryan Spence talk about the projects that him and his partner did through with farmer-led research to kind of get at their on-farm questions. And you can find the recording of that on the TAA website under webinars. So today we're going to hear from three speakers about their experiences. You'll see their names here on the slides. I'll introduce them in a minute, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So you can put your questions in the chat at any time, or you could unmute during the Q&A session. So just to give a little background before we get started, I don't know how much each of your slides are going to talk about this, but basically the idea behind farmer-led research and the program that the TA is developing and we are collaborating and supporting in the development is to have farmers be in the driver's seat and have research be specific to their farmers and growers' questions and combine scientific rigor with local knowledge, with practical knowledge to help set up trials to give farmers some evidence base for their decisions around what to grow and how to grow in their local conditions. Because as Janet said, Northwest Territories has unique conditions that often research that's published out there doesn't always take into account. So the TAA is currently designing a farmer-led research program. So if you are a grower or farmer who's really interested in that and wants to get involved, the first kind of call out for projects and interest will be for the next growing season coming up. So if you are one of those people, you can email, I just put the email in the chat, research@nwtagrifood. And then you will be added to a list and you can reach out and see how we can support in putting together some kind of proposal for your own research. So that being said, we're going to start today with Rebecca Ivanoff. And Rebecca supports farmers across Ontario to improve quality, quantity, and diversity of ecologically, regionally adapted, and climate resilient seeds through participatory processes and variety trials and on-farm breeding projects. And I'm sure she's going to tell you a lot more about it. So we'll leave that there. And then we're going to have Peggy Bailey, who is the co-owner of Three Forks Farms with her husband Eric on Manitoulin Island and is a commercial seed producer and has much experience in that regard and also has engaged in farmer-led research. So Peggy's going to tell us about that. And we're also going to have then Evelisa, who's also an experienced farmer researcher with the EFAO, so the Ecological Farms Association of Ontario, specifically looking at landrace breeding and has some really interesting, exciting projects around watermelons and squash, adapting those for a northern Ontario climate where Evelisa lives near Thunder Bay. So with that, I will hand it over to Becca. Is it Becca or Rebecca? Which one do you prefer?
Either of those is wonderful. I just don't respond to Becky.
Okay, great. Good to know. Okay, so welcome, Becca. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Rosie. I'm excited to talk about seeds. Seeds are one of the things I love so much. Um, as Rosie said, I am the seed program manager at the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario, and I also implement Seed Change's Canadian program in the province of Ontario. So I have colleagues nationally, as well as here in Ontario. I have a lifelong just love of plants and culture. You can see me here in very obviously the 80s in my velvet dress, where my deado or my grandfather is teaching me about sunflower seeds. There's a big head of sunflower seeds behind. And, I loved learning about seeds and we used a lot of sunflower oil in our cooking. So it was like part of the culture of food. And I got so excited about that. And so I went off to university and I studied botany and anthropology. And then I worked with farmers in Honduras. And you can see here one of the farmer research groups working on a variety trial for beans up high up in the mountains. There's clouds in the way of some of those mountains, but here we are working on a trial. And I was inspired by those folks to see what is happening in the seed world in Ontario more broadly. So I went and started a journey of 6 years of working on a mixed farming operation. There was 200 acres. We had cattle and we had about 10 to 12 acres of vegetables, which is where I mostly worked. But one of the things that I got to do while working on that farm is reintroduce seed production into the farming system with my mentor Johan, who you can see here in a photo, and also start to learn about all of the amazing work that is happening in Ontario in terms of seeds, seed production, and seed saving. And I started a little collaborative. We called it a plant breeding club, and we worked on breeding a brand new pepper variety together. So I think for me in that whole process, and now I work at EFIO, and part of that sort of journey with seeds, I just want to uplift that they carry knowledge themselves. They are tied to culture and identity, and they have this cool genetic potential. And so we like to say that good food comes from good seed. And so that's why when we talk about food systems, we're going to also talk about seed systems. And, Northern Ontario, where wonderful Evelise and Peggy live and work, may be different than the Northwest Territories, but there's still some of those same challenges of short seasons and long summer days, and perhaps not a lot of access to locally adapted seed. There's lots of cool opportunities. And some of that is around creating regionally adapted seed. And so I want to tell you a bit about why that matters. So some of you might have had the experience of going to the hardware store and buying some seed and planting it in your garden. And, it gets like really confused by the extra long days and bolts really fast, which means go to seed too late that it doesn't actually produce a delicious tomato by the time the frost comes. And so things which show us that seeds are often the seeds we buy at the store like that aren't regionally adapted. They're not adapted to our local conditions. So what does regionally adapted mean? It basically means seeds that are grown, selected, and saved in a situation like yours. So, they want to have similar maybe soils and weather patterns and length of days and things like that. And each generation that a seed is planted in that area, it's going to remember those past seasons. So we can, slowly work together with seed to get maybe better yields and have less crop failures. And really small actions can year over year with patience create some big improvements. So how do we do this work? Well, one of the ways you can do this work, and you're going to hear more about it from both Peggy and Ev. So just hold on to your excitement, is through variety trials, which is, finding what thrives where you are. So say you have some seeds that your grandma gave you. There's a seed from the farmer down the road. There's also the ones at the health food store. There's ones at the Canadian Tire. Okay, so we're going to see which ones of these actually grow well in our area. We don't know. Maybe the ones from any of those are going to grow really well, but we want to see. So we're going to plant varieties side by side, and we're going to treat things as similarly as we can. So because we're just looking at what the seeds themselves, what they remember. So we want to, compare them under our real on-farm or in-garden conditions. And we then make observations. So we're going to observe, maybe we're going to see like how many pounds of rutabaga, like in the first picture, are in each section of your field. Or maybe you're going to really, really want an excellent tasting carrot. So you're going to taste the different varieties and you're like, ooh, that one just doesn't taste good. So we'll not take that one, to the next year. Or you want to look at pest and disease resistance, or maybe you're like, is it going to survive in this short climate? And we're going to think about all of those things we want to observe, and we're going to look at key stages right from germination. So when you're planting the seed to all the way to maturity and onto your plate. There's things that our dear folks here are going to talk about, but some of the things that are important for variety trials, if once you can do a very basic one where you're not taking a lot of data and you're just doing observation, that's more called a screening trial. But then if you want to do one which is what the farmers here at EFAO do, is they actually do one where we can do statistics on the data. And that makes sure that we can confidently say that this variety is better because of its genetics and not because, I accidentally put a lot of compost on this part of the field or something like that. So we want to do, we're going to do a lot of different replicates, which means we're going to plant the same number of plants at different spots in the field, and we're going to consistently take notes, and we're going to have like the equal number of plants in each of those varieties and each of those randomizations. And you can learn lots about how to run variety trials through the work of EFAO, through Sarah, who's here on the call. She leads our research program. So we can tell you more, but really this real world data can give you confidence in making decisions for the planting of future varieties. What are other ways you can do this work? Well, you can save seed. And you can either do that after you do a variety trial, and you're like, okay, so half of those didn't actually survive the season, and of the other half of those didn't taste very good, so I'm going to save seed from my favorite ones from your variety trial. And there's lots of benefits to seed saving. You're like we're talking about, you're adapting to your climate. Maybe you're preserving heirloom or culturally important varieties. Maybe you're just like learning to be independent and not have to rely on other people to grow this really key part of our food system. So when you save seeds over time, populations of plants become hardier and faster maturing, and some of those things that make them grow better in your environment. Some things that are really easy to start with because you don't need a lot of the plant are things like tomatoes and beans and peas and lettuce. The lettuce can be tricky, and Peggy's going to tell you about that. So you're wanting to grow things till they're fully mature, and you're going to clean your seeds, and you're going to learn these terms when you learn about seed saving, like population size and isolation distance. And those might be big terms, but they're not that scary when you actually get to know them. But it just means that when you plant the seeds you save, that you will get plants that you expect, that they're not a mix up of a zucchini and a pumpkin and you get some sort of weird pumpkin or something. So there's lots of little things you can learn about seed saving, and I'm always happy to talk about seed saving with you. But yeah, that's one of the ways that we can adapt crops to our area, and an important part. And you can do so if you're like, I really love this one kind of bean and I love it so much and I'm going to save it year over year and I'm going to make sure that it's very similar. Like these red beans, they're actually from Honduras. They're Macusalito beans. I love them so much. All I'm doing is selecting the ones that do best and that have the right red color and don't go all vining all over the place. So they are staying the same variety. But imagine you wanted to make something brand new. And that's where you come to breeding, which is the making of new populations and varieties of plants. And we here, both through my Bauta Initiative colleagues and with EFAO, work with the farmers who are doing this. And I told you about my pepper project that I started with folks. So we heard from people we were selling to that they wanted a big, square kind of pepper like you see at the grocery store, but they wanted it to ripen in time. So we took the pepper that ripened the fastest, which is Ace, and we found the most blockiest, thick-skinned pepper that we could, which is Aristotle in this case, but it never matured in time. It was always a little green by the end of the season. So we crossed them together and we spent a few years selecting out of that for what we wanted. And there are other folks that are doing amazing work with carrots. Like, look at how beautiful these carrots are. So they have a diverse population and they're pulling out the plants that they don't like out of the field, and they're leaving the crops that they do like, as well as tasting. And then in the case of carrots, because they're a biennial plant, they're actually replanting the tasty carrots and having them grow flowers to go to seed. So pretty cool. But all of this work is happening, and sometimes farmers can find that they're doing this work in the field by themselves. And so one of the things that is really important to the work that I do is to make sure that we're not just sharing seeds, which is important, but also that we're sharing knowledge. So creating networks of how to talk to each other, having really fun, like farmer-led research symposiums, which I invite you all to, or coming out to field days like this one at the top with the watermelon is for the watermelon that Ev grew, where I got to go visit in the summer. And we have lots of different ways that we can share the knowledge that we gain through the work in the fields. So you don't have to have a fancy degree or a fancy lab to do this work. You just need your curiosity and your observation skills and a bit of patience. You can always start small, like test and look at 2 to 3 varieties side by side, see which ones thrive and which ones struggle, learn how to collect healthy, mature, seeds from those plants, talk to your community about what is important to, grow and steward in your community, connect with folks like us. We love to support. And also, there's lots of different resources out there. I'm just going to throw 2 out there that I find very useful if you want to learn how to just save seed. One really useful little booklet is called How to Save Your Own Seed by Seeds of Diversity Canada, and they're a national organization that works at preserving and supporting backyard seed savers. If you go to seeds.ca, you can find their book. It's really small, super helpful for those learning. And then if you're more excited about digging into on-farm variety trials, there's an excellent guide out there. And I think the best way to get to it is to go to efao.ca and find the farmer-led research page. And then you can see we have a bunch of resources there. But start small and build your confidence. You've got this. Oh yeah, that's what I say right here. You've got this. So remember that seeds are knowledge keepers. So you are being part, you have buddies in this process in the seeds and with your community. Um, I think that, it's a fun thing to do is to work with seeds. Seeds, in my observations, really bring people together. Um, and I think the more we talk about how regionally adapted seed is like a foundation for a lot of the work that we all want to do in terms of feeding more people in our communities and growing in a healthy way, I think we'll have really strong food systems. So I invite you all to do and be curious about seeds and seed work. Um, my dear colleague Sarah threw this in. If you have a phone with you, you can go to these QR codes, but we'll also send the links to Rosie. But this is the research library with all of the past research reports that farmers in the EFAO network have done. And if you are interested in attending our online research symposium, which is happening December 1st, you can use the promo code researcher25 and you get free registration. So you can use that QR code and come and learn from others, but you don't have to wait until December 1st. In fact, you can listen to farmer researchers right now. I'm going to pass it over to you, Peggy.
Hi. Oh, that was amazing, Becca. Thank you. The work that you do is so incredible. Hello, bonjour, Annie. My name's Peggy. I am co-owner of Three Forks Farms, on Manitoulin Island, where I operate a mixed operation, vegetable, chicken, and seed operation with my husband, Eric, who you see in this picture. Um, we are just now in our 10th season of operating our farm, which seems crazy that it's gone by this fast. We actually originally started our farm in a place called Warren, which is about 2.5 hours from here, and it's actually zone 4A. And since then, in 2020, we moved to Manitoulin Island for 5A. So the research that I'm going to talk about today was actually conducted in zone 4A, just for context. Um, yeah, so the next slide. Thank you, Becca. So we were talking about we did this lettuce seed production research project with Sarah's guidance, I should say, because when we started our seed operation on the farm, there was a couple of motivations. One was that lettuce was one of our main crops that we were growing on the farm. And so we felt like it was valuable for us to like have varieties that we could grow and save that we could weave into our production. And then also when I was doing my market research about starting a seed company, all of the seed companies in Canada were like, we need more lettuce seed. Like we just don't have enough people producing lettuce seed in Canada to meet demand. So I was like, well, this is an opportunity that I could really, there's mixed opportunities here. But when I started trying to grow lettuce seed on our farm, it did not work out well. I remember actually, as an example, I was so excited because I held a farmer kitchen table meeting, a seed saver kitchen table meeting, and Abir, who's like the manager of Bauda, came, and I was so excited to show him my lettuce that was going to seed, and he was like, "This is never gonna go to seed." And I was like very embarrassed because I didn't know, and I was like realizing that it was like I was I had a lot to learn. Anyways, talking with Sarah, I was like, oh, there's a way that I can actually figure out how to grow lettuce seed in Northern Ontario. And so we did this very calculated trial on lettuce seed production, evaluating whether we could use a hoop house to grow lettuce for seed in Northern Ontario, and it would work. And so we did this really calculated process. Thank you, Becca, for switching my slides when you know I need to. This is great. where we had the exact same varieties planted in the same plot, but only like 10 feet apart, but one section of them being covered and one section of them not being covered. And so I built a hoop house for all of the covered lettuce seed, and it also had some um flowers in here as well. Um, but I was able, because they were so close, they were literally in the same plot, I could really see whether or not um it worked to have the lettuce in a hoop in a larger hoop house and whether we could actually grow seed. And so if we can go to the next slide, um so we actually found that it was like night and day different. So, and I will just explain that this hoop house that I built, which was not, I would never recommend anyone to build this hoop house. That was one of the learning lessons, but it was like made out of PVC pipe and it was very tall, like it was probably I think it was about 16 to 20 feet tall, but open on both ends. So it was a lot of airflow. Like there was a lot of opportunity for pollination, airflow without the plants getting too hot, but enough to cover them and protect them from morning dew, which is a critical component of seed production or lettuce seed production, and also keep the flower heads dry when we have a high moisture at the end of the season, particularly in late August, early September. So I was able to control the conditions to allow for the lettuce to finish going to seed. And we found that it most definitely, almost all varieties produce seed in the hoop house, with the exception of Log Block, which I later learned is a proprietary seed, and I probably shouldn't have been trying that. And it's actually designed, it has been bred specifically so that it doesn't go to seed. So that was also a learning lesson. Um, but yeah, so it was very clear the stuff that was in the hoop house worked. The stuff that was not in the hoop house did not even really go to seed. And we also produced a very good quality germination, and the value, the yields was actually quite high, which was like a win-win. Um, so we also wanted to evaluate, so if we were to build a hoop house, to do this on a larger scale, how long would, like, how much seed could we sell and how long would it take to pay off buying like the proper infrastructure to do that? So you'll see this chart that was like an evaluation of how many years it would take to pay off a hoop house just through selling lettuce seed, which is actually very reasonable to be able to do that. Um, so, yeah, so that was what we found in that example. But after this, so this was in 2018, and since that time, after the year after that, we actually tried growing lettuce seed in a different style of hoop house, and it didn't work because it got too hot. And so we've been learning different conditions that go along with what will allow the lettuce to produce under cover and what won't. One of the things I will definitely say is that like having a structure that is high enough, like if it's too low, like so low tunnels, caterpillar tunnels, we found it did not work. However, if you have a high tunnel, like something that's like over 16, 20 feet in height, you get enough airflow and you can keep it from getting too hot where we are. And we have also continued to find that we have, even in zone 5A where we are, and we have very dry conditions on this island, we still have varied results with outdoor production. And so I would say that the results of this, even years after, still stand. And we are still we found this whole process incredibly valuable, and has definitely leveled up our lettuce seed production for our little tiny seed company that we have here. So, yeah, I don't know if I have any other slides. I don't think so. No, I don't. So that's great. So that's what we did, and I'll pass it all over to Evelisa.
Okay, perfect. I love, Peggy, that this was so valuable to you because even just hearing you talk about it is so valuable to me, who year after year after year has like terrible failures trying to grow lettuce seed. Like the first year I did it, it worked great, and I was like, I can do this, and then not since. So maybe I do need to take like a note from you and try it undercover. Okay, but the project I'm going to talk about is not my failed lettuce. It's some successes we've actually managed to have trying to basically trying to find watermelon that actually want to grow where we're growing. Well, so in Northern Ontario, I grow near Thunder Bay, and this was a project that I worked on as a farmer-led research project supported by Rebecca and Sarah and the EFAO. And one of the big things that they did in supporting this project was really helping bring together growers from 5 different farms, so 3 in the Thunder Bay area and 2 down in the Ottawa area. And we all worked together on this project collaboratively. So us, 5 farms, a bunch of farmers, and a bunch of seeds. And our goal, as I mentioned, was trying to find watermelon that actually want to grow in our gardens in a reliable way. So sort of like I was just kind of alluding to with this lettuce seed thing, like sometimes it works, but most often it didn't. And that was the experience I had with watermelon, using a whole bunch of different commercial varieties I'd tried over the years. I'd find one that I thought, would do great one year, and then the subsequent 3 years it would suck. And so I just was kind of on the verge of giving up on watermelon when I heard about this practice called landrace breeding. And I thought, I wonder maybe if this is how I find watermelon that actually want to grow in my garden. And so just to back it up a step, landrace breeding is, basically Rebecca explained it without using the term earlier, but it's essentially how our food crops were originally domesticated. And it's simply a process of starting with a lot of genetics in your seed population and saving seed from the fruit that you like the best and replanting them the next year. And over time, these seeds, because they remember and they know, are going to learn to grow in your garden. And if you're saving seeds from your favorite plants, the ones that taste the best or grew the best, you get to decide what is your favorite. But over time, you and these seeds together are kind of learning to work together, learning to work in your garden, in your climate, and adapting. And the idea is eventually you get to a place where everybody is just thriving. And so landrace breeding really, again, as Rebecca said, doesn't take a laboratory or a huge base of knowledge. It just takes a willingness to be patient, to be curious, to make observations. And so this is something that us 5 farmers decided we all had, and we wanted to see if it could work to help us find watermelon that would grow reliably. So the way we did it, this was a project that took place over 3 years. Again, at these 5 separate sites, we all started with seeds from across 23 different varieties of watermelons. And we planted out on our respective farms at least 25, often many more, watermelon plants. And then we would save seed from the 25 first delicious melons that we harvested that year. And those seeds would get replanted the following year. And so we were all kind of doing this in parallel. So we weren't sharing seeds between each other unless somebody needed seeds for some reason. But really, we were just trying to see, so I would save seeds from my first 25 great tasting watermelons. I'd plant them the next year, and then I'd save seeds from those, kind of repeat for 3 years. Maybe the next slide, Rebecca. And so that happened from 2022 to 2024. And we took some data, yield data, days to maturity data along the way. And when we crunched the numbers, or when Sarah and Rebecca crunched the numbers, really nothing was particularly statistically significant. But there were some interesting things we learned along the way. And one of them was a situation we ran into with the growers in my area, so near Thunder Bay, was that our seeds they would germinate really well, and then they just didn't want to grow. And so they would sit there, as these tiny little seedlings for what felt like forever before they would finally burst to life and take off and race to make watermelons before the first frost. And every year pull it off. But it was really strange about the slow start. And one of the things we learned was that watermelon need high temperatures overnight in that kind of critical time when the seeds are inside the fruit maturing. And by high temperatures, it's like 20 degrees overnight is ideal. And that is not temperatures that we get here ever, really, overnight. So that was an interesting learning for us that like just because we can grow some delicious fruit more and more reliably, the seed piece can be trickier too, but they seem to pull it off every year. So we're all still learning, basically. And another big thing that came out of it was just how appealing watermelon are. Like everybody loves watermelon, especially when they don't expect it. And so it was really fun for all the farmers to share these watermelons. Some shared them with their CSA customers and asked for feedback and would get seeds back or like tasting notes on a napkin. We would have field days and tours and tasting events. And it was just really neat to see not just the farmers work together and collaborate and not just the seeds, but also kind of our broader communities get involved. And it's really cool. Like it seems so simple, but when somebody is faced with a watermelon that they love and they can save the seeds from them, which is just intuitive with watermelon, you know, they're making a really important selection and about kind of what seeds get planted and what food gets grown and what is, you know, it's like taking a bit of control about the shape of your food system in a really simple, really easy way, but a really meaningful way too. And so that was a really cool thing that came out of this project for us to learn. In terms of the statistics, that didn't really show much. We started wondering about this and realized that days to maturity is probably not a great reference point, and I've had some interesting conversations since then. But this is probably something that is also very true for growers in the Northwest Territories with short seasons and really long days. Days to maturity as like a proxy for earliness is not always that helpful. So that's an interesting thing to keep thinking about and try to figure out another way or better way to talk about earliness. Yeah, and then just the collaborativeness of this project, collaborating with each other, but also with the watermelons and the seeds and all of that knowledge in between has just been really great and with communities. And so this breeding as a farmer-led research project kind of formally ended in 2024. And then last year, at 2 sites, we grew out these 5 populations of landrace watermelons, so from each of the farms, along with the commercial check. And we were just really curious to see, could we tell a difference? Like over 3 years, did the watermelons in my garden evolve or adapt in a way notably different than at the farm 45 minutes away or than a farm in Ottawa? And how do they all compare to a commercial variety? And so we had a lot of fun with that. It was also a great opportunity to invite the public in and do some tours and tasting and learning. And in terms of the numbers and data crunching, that is still happening. So we don't know really quantitatively, but qualitatively, I would say that the populations look different. And just to say too, even though the numbers don't represent it, I notice in my garden that watermelon is now a reliable crop that I plant every year. Before, it was one of those ones where you'd stick it in the ground and kind of go, I'm probably not going to get anything out of this, but I'm going to try. And now, if I got nothing from the watermelon, I would be really disappointed. So that feels like progress, even if the numbers don't show it. Yeah.
I think this is a great teaser for the research symposium because you will be presenting the update from 2025 on December 1st, right?
It's true. I will.
So you can hear about how those 5 populations performed then. And it's some cool data.
I don't know if I connected my audio in the right way. Uh-oh.
This is the best watermelon ever.
Can you hear this little kid? This is the best watermelon ever. People get so excited.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Becca and Peggy and Evelisa. So now we have time here for questions. And so, yeah, great. Now we can kind of see everybody. that wants to be seen, and we can see if anyone has any questions that they'd like to unmute and just ask, or you can put your questions in the chat as well.
I have, are you hearing me okay? Yep. Okay. I love seed saving. I just never get around to it, for a number of reasons. One person operation, the size of your home garden is probably the size of my small urban farm. So not having the space, I mean, I need to maximize profits. And yeah, but I like the idea of the variety trial, and maybe that's something that I can start with. And then moving on maybe into seed saving. I was just curious, do you have any ideas? We have a very short season in Yellowknife. Besides peas, beans, lettuce, and tomatoes, can you think of something else that that's not biennial and that could actually that we could do here?
Well, can I just ask you before they jump into answering that, if you can give a time of like when you plant in the ground, usually, typically,
Yeah.
on average, and then when the first frost happens. So,
Well, things have really changed in the 20 years or so that so I would say I direct seed in early May, peas and carrots, as soon as the snow is off the ground. So it gives me a chance to check those things off my to-do list and they're done. Then I start seedlings as well, in the house, and would plant those more towards the end of May. So that, seedlings, leeks, Brussels sprouts, that kind of stuff. And the beans I start indoors mid-May, but plant them really at the end of May, first week of June, kind of thing. And lettuce, I don't really grow because I process everything that I grow. I make value-added products, meals and dressings and desserts. That's how I make money. So, seed saving is also something else. It's like the amount of money that I can make from a very small space is not as big. But yeah, and lettuce, everybody grows lettuce in Yellowknife. So, I've sort of left that to other people to bring to the market. Yeah.
I think you can go back to your first points and then let Evan and Peggy maybe speak to the variety points. Yes, doing an additional thing as a farmer is always a challenge. And so I recognize that. And I also think it's important, and I think you can also do it in community and in perhaps ways that make sense. So maybe things to start with in terms of, as a market gardener, save seed from things that are at a market garden at a selling stage when their seeds are ready. So like the watermelons Ev is speaking about are a really great example because you might have seen the slide with the little tiny packets of like seeds, and that was like she was selling her watermelons and then the customers would give her the seeds back. Like, whoa, how cool is that? And so to think about things that have seeds at that point. So maybe, if you let a lettuce bolt, you can't sell the lettuce, but you can do that for a tomato or something. And then the other thing is you can do variety trials, and it's a great thing for a market garden because you can take, especially if you're just looking for like the quality at market stage, you can take the data and still sell the produce. So super great way for a market gardener to do that work. And in terms of like what varieties to work with or which crops to work with first, Ev or Peggy, what do you suggest?
I mean, when I first started seed saving, I felt very similar. Like I was market gardening and had been approached to maybe try saving seed, and I just felt like it was one more thing on top of an already very busy kind of schedule, and I didn't know that I was going to be able to have time for it. And so I picked two varieties or two things. I picked radishes and I picked peas because I knew that I always had radishes just go to seed in the garden anyways. So I knew that that
Okay.
could happen without me doing
Okay,
anything.
that's a good idea.
Yeah,
And
that's a good
they
point.
happily just sit there. The seeds don't shatter. They won't fall on the ground. They'll just wait, basically, patiently for you. And then peas I was already growing anyways, and I always missed some on the vines.
The
And
vines.
so I was like, well, why don't I just so I knew that they also would mature seed. So I thought, well, why don't I just intentionally miss a section of it? I mean, it would maybe be $20 worth of peas to sell at market. I could risk that, for
Yeah,
for the experience of trying seed. And I mean, I was hooked after that. So then it wasn't hard
That's
to
my
find.
fear.
Then it wasn't hard to find time. Then I made time. And now I grow less vegetables, but it's
Yeah.
way more fun.
Mm.
So that would be
But
one approach.
radishes
It's like,
is a good idea. Okay.
and then my other thought is you could also think of it in terms of like, what am I doing in my market garden? So I'm thinking about dill. If you're using dill in some of the canning you're doing or the food you're
Okay.
doing, you can still pick the dill weed and let the dill plant go to seed. So you can kind of double dip. So some
Yep.
crops will let you do that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they need to be open pollinated seeds, right? Open pollination.
Yeah, so if you want to have the seeds that you save be like the plant that you're saving from, save from an open pollinated seed. You
Yeah.
can save seed from a hybrid, but then you might. So for the pepper project, we actually
Yeah.
had two hybrids we crossed, and like that initial population of we had yellow peppers in there. We had like so much genetics that were hiding behind all of that. So it's just a multi-year breeding project.
Okay.
But if you want
Mm. I think we lost you.
Oh,
Yeah.
we lose Becca. Okay.
Mm.
Becca, you're frozen a little bit, so we'll just while we're waiting for you, we'll pass it over to Peggy.
Yeah, I didn't get to hear what like when you have your first frost, like how long
Oh,
is
I didn't get to that. Well, it used to be when I started gardening that Labor Day weekend was sort of the first frost. And if you survived that, you were good to Thanksgiving. We haven't really had a frost until Thanksgiving the last few years.
Oh wow.
So it's a big change. I've also changed location. Now wind is a bigger issue. So May to the end of September is the ultimate length of it, and it can decrease based on the year.
Right. Yeah, so
Yeah.
your season's like not that different. It's like kind of I'm amazed. I want to come to the NWT so bad. So maybe I should just like come to Yellowknife for a visit. It's like my dream. It's bucket list. Anyways, um I was the going back to the variety trials component. I think one of the things that we have done loosely, but I feel like if you're just like processing all your stuff, and forgive me because I just don't know enough about what you do, and I'm making assumptions, but one of the things that we have found variety trials have been really useful for is like storage crops. Like we grow a ton of storage stuff. So like beets and turnips and carrots, and not all are created equal and not all store well. And so we've had to find specifically in like I don't know if you grow cabbage. It's something that takes up
Mhm.
quite a bit of space, but those kinds of things that have allowed us to really extend our season, make ourselves more profitable long term. Evelisa knows a lot about this as a winter CSA operator, or was a winter CSA operator. But yeah, like I think that that's something I think that there's a lot of opportunity to learn more about, is like which crops like that work well in our climates, our root crops and our storage crops, and which ones are actually going to store well for us under those conditions.
Yeah. Storage is a big issue because of the cost of electricity, which is just incredible. Yeah.
Well, thank you, France. That's was a very stimulating question and really interesting responses. And I'm looking at the clock, and it looks like we're almost up with our time. And I just wanted to make a few notes at the end about our next webinar that's happening next week. So I'm wondering if the speakers have any last words they'd like to say before we close out.
I'm curious.
Do you ever need someone to come to? Oh, sorry. If you ever need someone to come, I'm happy to come.
All right. I'm making a note, Peggy. Write that down, Janet. Coming.
One thing that I just wanted to add is we talked about frost. And yes, it is much later and it can go to the end of September. But starting in August, we start having night, and so the angle of the sun as well change. So it's as if you can't almost count on too many hours of sunlight in September. So I just leave carrots and leeks in, hopefully they get sweeter, but they're not necessarily going to get any bigger than what they are then. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important to say, France, because as Evelisa brought up, there is this idea of days to maturity is not the right thing to measure in certain climates, right? So when we're talking about Northwest Territories, what is the right thing to measure if nothing grows in September, even if there isn't frost, right?
Yeah,
so because of the light. So
yeah.
thinking through, and that's in my mind what makes farmer-led research such an interesting opportunity to figure out what to measure and what actually works, or what do we need to know for food in that place. So great, thank you. Other comments? Becca, you were gonna unmute.
Oh yeah, I was just wanting to know if Alia or Yuliani had any thoughts. I know you've mostly been off camera, but I wanted to invite you in. Any questions? Any excitements?
Alia, do you have anything? I'm gonna talk about actually Yuliani is our one of our guests for our webinar next week.
Exciting.
Yeah, with Erin Nelson. So I wanted to put a plug in for that. So Yuliani is going to have time to speak with Erin translating. Yuliani from Cuba. So
I would just say reach out to folks at EFIO if you have questions. We're always here to answer, even if at this time it's a bit slow. And hopefully see you on December 1st.
Yeah. Alia, do you have any questions or comments?
No, sorry, I'm having some people in fixing my heating right now, so I'm a little distracted. But I heard most of the presentation. It was very good.
Great. Well, thanks for joining, Leah. And we will be posting the recording of this. So hopefully those who registered but weren't able to attend have a chance to review. Yeah, so next week's webinar, I wanted to put a plug in. Yuliani is going to be talking with Erin Nelson about a project that they're working on in Cuba with in a farmer-led research way. So do you want to talk briefly about that, Erin? Just put a plug in.
Sure, quick plug. We have Yuliani Pacheco visiting from Cuba. She's in Canada right now. She is an agronomist and agroecologist and has been working for a couple of decades with farmers in Cuba, supporting their efforts to do on-farm research, including participatory plant breeding. That sounds a lot like some of the things that were talked about today, but maybe with some different crops. And so she's going to be sharing a little bit about the work in Cuba, and then we're going to be showing a short video that was produced by a student here at the University of Guelph, and it highlights 4 Cuban farmers who are part of this participatory farmer research project. So they've been involved in on-farm innovation, and it kind of highlights how being involved in that work has impacted their lives. So kind of touching on some of what was said today too about the power of this kind of work beyond like there's the power in terms of the actual varieties that get developed and the on-farm innovations that happen, but also lots of kind of spin-off benefits. And I think some of that will come through with that video. So I hope that some of you, and maybe even tell your friends, it would be great to have lots of folks from the Northwest Territories joining for a little visit to the tropics.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you so much to all the speakers for your time and energy in putting together the presentation and sharing all your stories and your enthusiasm for working with seeds. And I'm really excited about how valuable this recorded webinar as a tool will be for inspiring others that were not able to join today. So before we sign off, Janet, would you like to say anything else before we sign off? I know you came on at the beginning and then just want to give you an open chance to say anything before we leave. Okay. Well, thanks again, everyone. And I hope you all stay warm and are well.
Perfect. Take
Thank
care.
you, Rosie.
Bye-bye.